This is the story of one of Florida's first industries, one that has endured for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Spanish actually brought the first cattle to Florida, and that took off. We had cattle roaming all over the state, and the energetic settlers that came in just rounded them up and made them their own. And this is what happened in Indian River County. As the early pioneer families came into the county, they saw that the land was good for cattle raising. And not only for beef cattle, but for dairies. Dairies were very important. But we had a number of families, old families here in the county, that were cattlemen and women, because the women worked just as hard as the men did on these cattle ranches. And so the cattle became the king in Indian River County. Will Barker is from a really old family, the Davis family, and Will has been a cowman for years and years. He has been very instrumental in helping to educate our young people about the cattle industry.
I'm Will Barker. I was born in Florida. I was born in Tallahassee, but my father was born between here and Fort Pierce. My father's been here in his family for probably 100 years or more, and I've had cattle since I was about 18. I've always enjoyed it. It's been some of the best times of my life, seeing what land can do and what land that's taken care of can do for the state and for us. We used to call Florida the last frontier because Florida was always behind the rest of the country. Everything started up in the Northeast. The people that came down here were tough. They were dedicated, they were loving people, they wanted to own their own place. And that's the pioneer spirit or whatever. It's what built this country. When I started, raising cattle and trying to find places to put them, my family didn't have a ranch, but you could lease land almost all over. I bet you there's a couple thousand acres in this county or more that I've driven cattle on and had pastures on for 10 years, and now they're houses 5 feet apart, 10 units to the acre. I've seen so many changes in the last 50, 60 years in this county, in the whole state of Florida. And I'm worried that if we don't preserve enough agricultural lands to keep productive land and dirt so we can raise food for people to eat, but if we don't salvage and save enough property and enough land in our county and other counties all over this state, it's going to look like New York City, one of the best growing environments in the world, right here on this peninsula we call Florida. But we need to save it, and I'm worried that it can't be saved quick enough.
Wesley Davis, who is our property appraiser now, comes from the Davis family and is related a long time to Will and his family. And Wesley grew up in West Wabassa. His father and his grandfather had the dairy, the Davis Dairy. Wesley ran the cattle, and they were into citrus too in that West Wabassa area, and knew a lot about the industry.
My name's Wesley Davis, and currently Indian River County property appraiser. And the way our family kind of settled in this area was back at the turn of the century. My great-grandfather, Edley Jackson, what he did for a living is just to survive, and that survival entailed basically hunting plumes, hunting the whooping crane, and hunting birds for ladies' hats. Yeah, this was a godforsaken territory. It was the mosquitoes. You didn't have air conditioned. I remember hearing the old timers talk about they would get cabbage palmetto roots and burn them in smudge pots to smoke everything out, that where just you could sleep inside something without getting eaten up. And it was no different for the livestock at the time. And they had cattle dipping vats, and they would put lead arsenate in the cattle dipping vats, and they would run, as they worked the cattle, it basically was a concrete block hole in the ground that they would build with cinder blocks and put the insecticide in there and run the cattle through it, and the cattle would jump off in it and go as far up their head as they possibly could to get the ticks and the mites and everything that was harmful to the livestock. And so we had one of those out there. They were very common. It was very common to have that method of fighting Mother Nature, if you will. And I remember seeing some scattered also throughout the state. Bull Creek Wildlife Management Area, they had some out there. They removed them, unfortunately. Used to be something we'd always go out there and look, and it would be neat to be able to take my grandson out there and show him what a cattle dipping vat was. And instead of using the ivermectin as we would today for insects and mite treatments and worms and all that, that's how they managed it. It's interesting to see how much the cattle industry has shaped this community. Even to this day, you have landmarks named after it. You've got Ranch Road. You have a lot of landmarks that are still centered around the cattle industry. And keeping in mind that before the citrus business, the cattle industry was king. And when I say cattle, you don't discount the fact that you really had some large dairies in this area. From a lot of the pioneer families, the Carters, the Tripsons, the Davises, we all had dairies. And it was a good business, and it was a good business mainly because you were able to have a climate that the cows would thrive, and so it really has shaped this community for generations to come, and will continue to.
One of our favorite places in Indian River County is the Sexton Ranch. This is the Treasure Ranch out on Ranch Road, which is 82nd Avenue. And there's almost a section of land out here that has been devoted to cattle raising for 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
I'm Sean Sexton, and I'm the third generation rancher and farmer on this land, on this ranch. My son is the fourth. I went to school and studied animal science at the University of Florida, following in my father's footsteps, literally, to become a cattle rancher and manage this ranch, which I started doing around 1979 when I returned from school. I was actually in those cow pens on my pony when I was 4 years old, and driving the tractor when I was 8. So I've been here, I've spent my life here really off and on. My father was interested in cattle from the beginning. He was, you boil him down, and he's first and foremost a cattleman. And I'm just proud. I was raised by people who loved land, and if you think beautiful land is rare, I'll tell you what's even more rare: people that love it. People are willing to risk their lives for it. And that would be a perfect characterization of my father. He was somebody who, and really his father, he knew what good land was. He was cultured in that. I was brought up the same, and my son feels the same way. I'd be in a real pickle if he didn't want to be here, but he does.
I'm Mike Sexton. We're on Treasure Hammock Ranch where I grew up. I'm the fourth generation steward of this land, and fourth generation cattle rancher. Back then, before the mall, this was out here. I mean, now it really doesn't seem that far from town anymore, but it was definitely a different life. I grew up kind of hard. My grandfather and my father never really treated me like a child. I was always just kind of expected to be a man, and I was working in these pens from a young age with my cousins, the Tripsons, and a lot of local guys who are like family to us. And I pretty much went away to school and realized how much I loved it here, and then made the decision to come back and manage the ranch. I actually took out a brace the other day that was put in probably 50 years ago, and I think, wow, they really, it's kind of incredible. When I say a brace, I mean a fence brace that was holding up a 5-strand barbed wire fence. It finally rotted out and I had to replace it, and it's just kind of an interesting moment to think, wow, this is here before I was ever even born. And it was made out of old lightered pine timbers, and the weight of that and the work that they had to do to fence this place off and make it what it is pretty incredible. I sit on several ag boards in the local county, and actually I sit on a tri-county one too, and young people, men and women, are the minority. There's not a lot of young people getting involved in ag. And that's probably the struggle. I don't think many places last past the fourth generation. People lose interest, families get bigger, they get more divided. We've had to get more creative in the way we do things and manage this place, and I hope we can continue to be successful and be here forever.
One of the reasons the Indian River County Historical Society does these videos is we want to showcase what we think are important in our history and for our future. And the cattle industry in Indian River County and throughout Florida is important for both reasons. It was very significant in making us who we are, and it will be significant in making us go forward in the future. If you look around at our ranches on these beautiful wetlands and grasslands and open spaces, you'll see that we really need more of them. If we don't preserve them, if we don't contain them, if we don't encourage our farmers and our ranchers to continue with their lifestyle, we're going to have wall-to-wall people and houses, and our resources, our natural resources, will not last too long if we go that way. So we need to forever be vigilant that these properties, these ranches and these farmers are contained for future generations.